All right, welcome back once again to even more viewer coaching. I know, I think this is 3 in a row or something, unless I put out a video in between. But we're doing once again the gold coaching, so we're trying to get a sense of how people generally play in gold, since it is the average rank of among the brawlhalla community. So Valblaze is up here on the Mordex, and they said they struggle with movement, so I'm going to try and get a sense of how they move around the map and stuff like that. The first thing I am noticing is that they tend to push themselves into the corner, which can make you get some early damage taken on your side, or an early gimp, unfortunately, so that is something to watch out for. Yeah, so a lot of the time when people are thinking, or I guess maybe overthinking about their movement a lot, they tend to give more space than they need. When a lot of movement, like right there, trying to evade with dashes, right, you push yourself off stage, and now you're out of jumps, start to panic in the air and stuff like that. A lot of the time people tend to overuse movement, when a lot of movement is really in the subtle stuff. So right there, I did a hop in place, didn't move fast fall, and that way I was able to get a nair punish. Same with that empty hop, right? So a lot of movement is about the small stuff. So if you're struggling with it a lot, the thing I would recommend to do, or if you're trying to learn about movement, is to overdo it at first, right? Let's say you're trying to play tennis, right? You're trying to learn how to hit a backhand, and you're just hitting it out every single time, but you're trying to get the form correctly. That's totally okay, right? Like, it's fine if you hit it out if you're getting the form correctly. And then over time, as you're refining it more, okay, now you only start to accept when you hit it in with the correct form. But in order to do that, right, you have to learn the form first. So the analogy here is that you want to learn the different options you have: the dashes on the ground, the dodges in the air, the empty hops, the fast falls. And so what I recommend first is to spend some time in training mode, just getting down your movement stuff. Oh, looks like that might have been lag there. Stuff like fast falls is the first thing I would really recommend, getting your fast falls like that, because you notice how that jump there, it was very, very precise, very subtle micro spacing. But the reason why I was able to do that is because I did a jump fast fall into a jump fast fall, right? And that's a very specific height and movement and stuff like that. So that's the first thing I recommend, is to try and overdo it a little bit. Just use your movement all the time. You're not going to win your matches, I promise you, but that's totally okay, because the goal isn't to win. It's to get accustomed and used to moving around the map. You know, just make it familiar, make it comfortable. After that, then start refining it. Notice the areas maybe in your replays where doing it gets you hit, and then you can be like, oh, okay, too much movement here, well, that's not a good thing. So I'm going to reel it back a little bit, and then I'm going to work on it from there. So that's what I recommend if you're trying to start off movement. I know it's very general advice, general tips. Movement is such a specific thing, though it's hard to give extremely specific tips for it, but that's the first thing I recommend. Work on your dashes and work on your fast falls. Fast falls number 1, though. Next up, in terms of movement, I think dodges is a great thing to look at. So let's see how Valblaze here dodges. Yep. So that's a clear example of like going for objective A. I kind of mentioned this in the last one, going for objective A's versus going for objective B's and stuff like that. Making your intentions obvious, and instead of just adding more, not just, I shouldn't say just, it's not easy, but having more things to do, maybe a second of delay, a fake out, a dash in and out, for example, right? So like right here, you're jumping off the wall back and forth, and if I'm really trying to edge guard you, trying to take the game, gimp and stuff like that, I notice that the timing that you're hopping off the wall is always the same. And so that's the number 1 thing, is like timing, things that people don't really think about, timing off the wall, like always hopping off, and that's how people get those dash jump ground pounds into the push off column. They're noticing the habit of when you're jumping off and then trying to attack those. So yeah, that's something that movement is really, I think, the quintessential example of the things you don't pay attention to and don't think about are the things to work on, which is why it's hard. All right, game number 2 here. Now, game 1, I was playing a little bit more on the backseat, so now I'm going to try and see how you deal with people like coming close to you, entering your zones and stuff like that, because that's also a big part of movement, is being able to fake out the aggressor, or at least being able to evade defensive play and stuff like that. So it seems like what I'm noticing is that you really try and give yourself a lot of space to back up and guarantee a hit, which is good. You know, focusing on movement first, especially if you mentioned that it is something you struggle with, is a great thing to do, and that's what I recommend people do all the time. So it looks like you're already on the right track. I think the timing of it just needs to be a little bit more precise, but I think given that, you know, with more experience, you did also mention that you're lagging quite a bit on stream. That could be part of the a bit slower timing, or at least refining it and stuff like that. And also, let's see how you react when I'm just like jumping in your zones. Do you go for a movement punish? Do you try and go for something guaranteed? Right, so like that dare, for example, it kind of looks like it's just, oh, please hit. I gotta hit this one just so I can guarantee the hit, because he's like so close, and I don't want to get punished. When in reality, me jumping up in the air, right, a down air, that's something that hits below, is pretty low percentage to hit someone in the air. So be aware of going for automatic attacks when people are in your zones. Let's see, do you dodge here? Yeah, a dodge out. So I noticed that you're holding out while getting hit. It's very subtle, but your character model is like moving a little bit out. And so a lot of the time when people dodge in a direction, they're dodging in the direction that they're already holding. So me, for example, like if I'm holding this way, that dodge is a little bit predictable, as opposed to something like this where I'm holding in and then I fake out my movement, right? And a good way to look at it is if your character model either instantly changes or doesn't change at all. Is a good way to fake people out. That's just something to be aware of. If your dodges are getting read as well, which is a big part of movement, is to not be too obvious with your dodges, or at the very least, like, mix them up. Even if it's obvious that you're going to dodge with a certain timing, you want the direction to be unknown, since dodge reading really is about two variables. It's about the timing of it, and it's about the direction of it. So if you can mix up one of those two or both of those two, it's a good thing to do. Now, that sidelight into side air is dodgeable. You did say you're lagging this, so maybe the reason why you weren't able to get that one out is because of that. But yeah, be aware of that as well. Dodge direction and dodge timing, not always holding in the direction. So right here, like, it looks like you're gonna go for the weapon, and you did dodge in on the weapon. Now, I missed because I'm terrible, but at the very least, the fact that I pointed that out and noticed it is something to look at in your own replays, excuse me. With about, like, missed opportunities. If your opponent missed an attack but you still notice a mistake, that's still something maybe you could work on for the future. That end light into side light, for example. Like, I was just standing right outside your range and you went for an attack, and I was able to bait that out with my own movement. So, like, maybe something you can consider is throwing in something like empty hops. It seems like you got a good sense of dashes and dashing off stage, maybe giving a little bit too much space, but at the very least, it's something that's on your mind, which is good. Mixing in things like empty hops and not committing right when you attack. Alright, game number 3 here. Now, I do recommend that people who come on stream mute the stream, so I believe that Valblaze cannot hear me as we're playing, which is good, because I think if people tend to mix up their gameplay based on what they hear on stream, then it's not really, like, up here, unfiltered, pure vanilla, how they tend to play on the ladder, and in that way it won't be as helpful. But I think a lot of people that do struggle with movement, a lot of why they do it is because the movement they're going for is, like, they see people move really fast, and they want to move really fast as well, and so they do the fast things. But I think the key, and this is kind of what I was hinting at in the first game, is a lot of movement is not actually the fast things, it's the small things, the decision making, the small timing, about knowing exactly when your dash ends and then you can attack, or like going for quick bursts of movement when you're in the reaction zone, right? When someone can't react to what you're doing, that's when you go in and aggress, or doing something like an empty hop, right, where it looks like you're gonna attack and then you don't attack. Those small split-second decisions are really what makes movement special, and I think a lot of the time when people see top players move really fast and they want to move really fast right away, they want to skip those in-between steps. They just want to be a fast mover, when becoming a fast mover is much more about the individual things than just, you know, it's like, in order to be a top-level tennis player, if we're going back to that analogy, you don't get that beautiful backhand instantly. It's about everything that led up to that backhand. You notice I am lagging a little bit right there, so I missed those dashes on the platform. But dashes on the platform is also like a higher level thing that I think people focus on right away, whereas some of the smaller things like fast falls and jump heights is really what you want to get down first. Again, the fundamentals before going all fancy. Now, that's not to say that going fancy isn't helpful or useful or fun to do, because absolutely I think it's good to practice, and dash movement on the platform, not only is it fancy, but it's incredibly useful. Hopefully it doesn't sound like I'm not telling you to work on any of those, but it's more so about like spending some time doing the more boring stuff, because you gotta work on the boring stuff in order to get the fancy stuff down, and then it's a lot more fun, right? So if you can start a drill where you need to get maybe 20 fast falls at the apex of your jump perfect right away, then when it comes down to that last stock red scenario, you're in ranked, or maybe you're even in tournament, you're not going to be missing those fast falls, and you're going to have confidence that you're always able to hit them. And if you have confidence, then other areas of your game freeze up. The thing that's beautiful about movement is that once you have it down, you don't need to think about it anymore, and for the rest of your gameplay, you can focus on other stuff. And that's really great because it frees up your mental stack, your mental load, and you won't be as tired because, you know, focusing on individual things is incredibly exhausting. And when you're in those scenarios, if you have to think about it, you're not really going to be able to think about other important stuff, like maybe going for the right attack or hitting the right punish, or at the very least paying attention to your opponent's habits. And maybe you're not executing on them, but at least you're noticing something. So a lot of it is building up fundamentals, getting those down so that you can work on the more complicated stuff. As for applying it into actual games, I recommend kind of just jumping in and going for it, knowing you're gonna lose, right? Trying out new stuff in the heat of the moment, death by fire, or what is it, trial by fire, you're gonna get burned. But that's okay, because now you're gonna get some lava protection gear or something. I don't know, Zelda analogy. I was just playing Ocarina of Time, so I've got that on my mind. But anyway, hopefully that's helpful. What basically the TLDR of this whole thing is, a lot of movement is, first you want to over apply it just so you get it down, learn the fundamentals, and then from there you want to start to, you know, refine that, polish it up. And the big area to look at is these smaller things that you don't necessarily pay attention to much, but when you slow down, maybe you go slow motion and replays, those are the things that start to be obvious. Things that they change when you get a hit or when you don't get a hit. Those small empty hops, those fast falls, the micro spacing, those are areas to look at. So anyway, that's some movement tips. Hopefully it's helpful. I know I kind of went a little all over the place there. But yeah, anyway, that's some viewer coaching. If you're in gold as well, I hope that helps. Even if you're not in gold, I hope it helps. Remember to be respectful to everyone who comes on stream, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.